Hello everyone. We're going to talk about converting radians to degrees again. However, this time we will do an example that is a little more complicated. And our example in this case is going to have fractions in it. And I know everyone loves fractions, right? So we may need a little bit help with it, but it's not really that complicated as it may seem initially. The problem we're going to work on is converting 3 over 4 pi radians into degrees. Okay? Very often when you work with radians, you're going to see fractions. So we really need to get better at fractions. First thing is, where does this pi belong? Many times I've noticed when people write fractions and there's something like this, students are not sure whether pi should go with a 3 or pi should go with a 4. And I just want to show you the math logic where pi belongs. So 3/4 pi means that there's a multiplication sign in the middle between the 3/4 and the pi. So how I can write this as well as I can write 3/4 times pi. Well, we know that, for example, 4 is equal to 4 over 1, or 6 is equal to 6 over 1, right? This we are all familiar with. I'm going to erase it so it doesn't take space here. So in this case, I can just write pi over 1. And now this becomes a multiplication of fractions. When we multiply two fractions, we just multiply the tops, and it becomes 3 pi. And we multiply the bottoms, 4 times 1. And this becomes 3 pi over 4. Okay? So if you see something like this, a fraction times a whole number, always know that the whole number goes on top with the numerator of the fraction. This is the numerator. This here is the denominator. Okay, good. So we clear this out. We're trying to convert 3 pi over 4 radians into degrees. If you remember from the last video, there's a proportion we need to write to do this conversion. And here's the proportion we will always do. We know that radians over 2 pi are equal to degrees over 360. And here, in this case, my radians are equal to 3 pi over 4. And the degrees, I really don't know them. I'm looking for them. So the degrees are equivalent to x. So here's what my proportion is going to look like. I'm going to write 3 pi over 4 divided by 2 pi is equal to x over 360 degrees. Okay, here's another scary looking fraction. We're going to make it easy. I'm going to take this thing and I'm going to simplify it. I'm going to make it easier and simpler. Here's how this works. 3 pi over 4 over 2 pi. I can rewrite it. Instead of using those fractions, I can just use division sign. So what I can do is I can say 3 pi over 4 is divided by 2 pi. If you notice, a fraction bar like this is simply a division. It says divide. So instead of writing it like this, which looks very complicated, I'm just going to say 3 pi over 4 divide by 2 pi. As we said, with 2 pi is the same as 2 pi divided by 1. So over here, I can just put a 1 on the bottom. Now, this becomes a simple problem of dividing two fractions. To divide two fractions, I simply keep the first fraction the way it is, and then I multiply, I switch the divide to a multiply, and then the second fraction I flip, or I switch. The 2 pi comes on the bottom and the 1 goes on the top. Now it becomes easier. I have to multiply two fractions. If you remember from the example above, when I multiply fractions, I multiply the tops, in this case 3 pi times 1, and I multiply the bottoms, in this case 4 times 2 pi. Now I can cross out the pi's from the top and the bottom, and I get 3 times 1, which is 3, over 4 times 2, which is 8. So this entire complicated thing is really the same as 3 divided by 8. Okay, now my proportion starts to look a lot easier. Now I already have 3 over 8 is equal to x over 360. How do I solve this proportion? I want x to remain on its own, alone. So I have to get rid of the 360. So I'm gonna multiply the top by 360 on both sides. 360 here cancels out. And when I divide 360 by 8, I get 45. So I get 45 times 3. Everything else canceled out. So x becomes equal to 135 degrees. Okay, let's think about this answer. What does this answer tell us? This answer tells us that 3 over 4 pi radians is equal to 135 degrees. Does this answer make sense? Let's draw a circle. This is a crappy circle. Let me just go back. I'll redo it. We draw a circle. And if we start over here as the Ferris wheel, will be 0 degrees. And then if we go across to the other side, like this, we move around, halfway, this will be equal to 180 degrees. If we talk about radians, this is going to be 0 radians, and this is going to be equal to pi radians. Well, what we were looking for in this problem was 3/4 of pi. So we're going to take pi and we're going to divide it by 4 parts. First I divide it in 2 parts, and then I divide it in 2 more. I get 4 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. I am interested to know how much are 3 out of the 4 parts as an angle. 3 out of the 4 parts. So I'm looking at this angle here. And the answer I got is that it's equal to 135 degrees. 135 degrees, which makes sense because it has to be, as we can see in the picture, more than 90 degrees. This is 90. And less than 180 degrees, and turns out it is exactly 135 degrees. Okay, now you have an example in which you're going to try this on your own. Okay, good luck trying it on your own. Feel free to ask me any questions.